golf fans, today we're diving into one of the most exciting moments in YouTube golf history. The Creator Classic at East Lake Golf Club brought together some of the biggest names in YouTube golf, and even some pro golfers, all on the eve of the Tour Championship. Let's break down the action that had everyone on the edge of their seats. Scottie Scheffler, along with YouTube stars like Nick Fat Perez Stubb of Bob Deuce Sports and Tyler Toney of Dude Perfect, arrived at the packed East Lake practice green. Scheffler found a quiet spot behind the green where he worked on putting with his coach Phil Kenyon, while Perez and Toney headed to their tee time with cameras and fans watching. Wednesday's Creator Classic was a true game changer. With 16 of YouTube's biggest golf stars competing at East Lake, the event attracted over 110,000 live viewers on YouTube and was simulcast on ESPN Plus and Peacock. Fans watched the worlds of YouTube golf and professional golf intertwine, culminating in a thrilling sudden death playoff.
And he buries it! Luke Kwon, your 2024 Creator Classic champion at East Lake. Bravo.
Luke Kwon won the first ever Creator Classic by defeating Wesley Bryan, Walsh, and Roger Steele in the sudden death play-off on the PA 518. Hole. Kwon won with the 15-foot birdie putt and secured his place in Creator Classic history.
Thank you, Jay. We'll open the floor for questions. If you could raise your hand, we'll bring a mic to you. Right in the back row, I think.
Jay, you talked about the potential broadcast changes coming in the fall to those events, to some of those events. We saw NASCAR announce some plans, I think last week, about some more commercial-free racing under green flag conditions. Is it fair to draw some parallels between those two, or do you foresee those changes being more on-screen during play?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Is it fair to draw some parallels between those commercial-free plans that NASCAR is planning on NBC Sports, or do you foresee those changes being more to, on-screen graphics and those sorts of things?
Josh, I think if you look back over the last couple of years, for us, we have continued to innovate within our broadcast. When you look at the impact of ShotLink, drone technology, the addition of gaming, some of the content that we're creating away from the field of play that we're incorporating into our broadcast to enhance our storytelling. And we've also seen a number of our sponsors who have created sponsored elements like the Aon Better Decisions program that add value to the fan experience. I think the best way to answer the question is to say that a lot of those changes have come as a direct result of fan feedback. And now that we have this Fan Forward initiative underway, we will continue to lean into that, gain the benefit of what our fans want to see in the PGA Tour, work with our incredible media partners to continue to find ways to enhance an already strong broadcast and production capability that you see each week.
A little bit, not too much off topic, Jay, but we haven't heard a lot about the golf ball rollback in a little bit. And I'm just curious, has your position changed on that? And if not, what actively are you doing?
Doug, I'm going to ask Tyler Dennis, our Executive Vice President, who leads our competitions, who has worked very closely with the USGA through the years, is currently in RNA, is working very closely with them right now, and I think it'd be appropriate for Tyler to provide an update on those efforts.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So, going back a very long time, we've collaborated really closely with USGA and RNA on all things related to equipment, and particularly since, the last 20 years or so, we've worked on and supported, I believe, 8 equipment rule changes. So the latest thing you're referring to was an announcement that was made this past winter about change to the specifications in golf ball testing. We've received that. We're in constant communication with them. And our process right now is really looking at the wealth of data we have with ShotLink and everything that goes on out here on the PGA Tour and trying to understand the implications of the rule change. It's set to go into effect in 2028. And we're sharing that, and we'll continue to share that with USGA and RNA. So no real update on our end other than we're working hard to take a close, data-driven look at all of it, understand what's going to happen, and provide feedback to our partners at USGA and RNA.
The only thing I'll add is I think it's important to note that a lot of the findings that are in that report, as Tyler said, are based on ShotLink data. We feel very strongly about the way our athletes are performing and the energy that's creating, not just on the PGA Tour, but across our sport. As he said, we will continue to work, collaboratively as partners. I think when I talk about the engagement and the alignment with our players, and when I say engagement, these are the topics that we're going to be leaning into and educating them, and really putting ourselves in a position where we can provide the best possible feedback and direction to the USGA and the RNA, and to have the ability now to, at this point in time, engage our fans in that discussion, not just about the PGA Tour, but there are elements of that fan forward initiative that touch the broader game, and we're excited to get that feedback and again be in a position where we can be stronger partners to the USGA and the RNA on that subject and others.
Jay, when the 2025 schedule came out, it looks pretty similar to the 2024 schedule structurally after a couple of years of big-time changes. Should we expect that to remain pretty stable? Like, is this what the PGA Tour is going to look like in 2026, 2027? Will we see similar signature events in similar places and a similar kind of ratio of full field to signature events?
Dylan, when you look at how the PGA Tour performed in 24, our first full year with signature events and the full field events, as I mentioned earlier, the signature events delivered, elite winners and elite competitions, as did the full field events. And we saw a 30% increase in strength of field at our full field events. And we saw players in many cases playing more events because of the competitive structure that we have in place. So year 2025 will be year two of this model. We're encouraged by what we've seen in 2024. I think the only fair way to answer that question is, it's our duty to the players and it's our duty to our fans to continue to, assess how we're performing. But we are proud to present that schedule for 2025, grateful to have the support of those partners. And I think the cadence, works very well. So for fans, I would expect to see what you have in 25 largely on a go-forward basis. But we're always open to improving if there's opportunities to improve.
Jay, I've heard you say you don't want to negotiate in the public, but I also hear a lot of fans saying this deal was supposed to be done with the PIF in December, end of year, and we're now in August, and we don't see much progress. One, how many times have you sat down face-to-face in the same room with them? And can you explain why it's taking so much longer than you originally thought?
I appreciate the question, and I understand the question. I think the best way for me to respond to that is when you look at where we are right now, we're in regular dialogue. We have the right people at the table with the right mindset. And I see that in all of these conversations, and that's both sides. And that's creates optimism about the future and our ability to come together. But at the same time, these conversations are complex. They're going to take time. They have taken time, and they will continue to take time. And as I sit here today, I think the most important thing for us and our obligations to our fans, our players, and our partners is to focus on what we control, which we're doing, as I outlined, and to continue to carry this momentum forward. But I'm not going to negotiate details in public or disclose details or specifics. But all I can say is that conversations continue and they're productive.
Is there any deadline that you've agreed to?
We have not agreed to a deadline. I don't think we want to restrict ourselves in that way. We want to achieve the best and right outcome at the right time.
Pass the mic to Bob. Thank you.
Jay, if I could just follow on that, are you concerned at all that maybe some of your partners, sponsors, TV partners might be reluctant to commit further while those negotiations, in other words, waiting to see where those negotiations go? Is there any concern that, hey, we don't want to commit any down the road until we know what that's going to look like? Or what kind of feedback do you have to that degree?
Well, I see Andy Bissett shaking his head with a strong no. Listen, we're fortunate, Bob, to have, when you think about the media partners that we have and the length of partnership, to have the power of NBC and Golf Channel, CBS Sports, ESPN Plus, our international partners, and to have the portfolio of sponsors that we have, many of whom have been here for decades, who believe strongly in the competitive platform and fabric of the PGA Tour, but they also believe very strongly in their and our duty to make a positive impact in the communities where we're invited to play, and then the charities that rest and sit in those communities. And so when I look at where we are in 25, as I said, we were really proud to announce that schedule and to have the support of our great partners, and we will continue to work very closely with all of them in 25 and beyond 25, with a focus on, continuing to innovate, continuing to drive this business forward together and collectively.
Over here. Looking over at Live, there is a relegation system. There are players that have contracts coming up. The DP World Tour has pathways back for those players. Is the PGA Tour going to have a pathway back for Live players with that kind of thing coming up around the corner? Is that a discussion right now?
As I said earlier, so we've announced our 2025 schedule. We're continuing to focus on what we control, moving forward with the great system that we have in place. And as it relates to any details of the conversations that we're having with the Public Investment Fund, I'm not going to disclose details. I'm not going to get into specifics. But I will tell you, when you look at what has happened on the PGA Tour over the last couple of years, to think about PGA Tour University, to now have 20 players that have access to the Korn Ferry Tour and the PGA Tour, to have these new and emerging stars, some of whom are still in college, like Luke Kwon, earning points and demonstrating to the world that they're coming and that they're capable of competing at the highest level, to the strength that we see at the Korn Ferry Tour, to the path that we have at the DP World Tour and our great alliance there, and those 10 players who've come this way, 3 of whom have made it into the FedEx Cup playoffs. But the system that we have, which extends to the international tours around the world, is really performing at a very high level, and that's what we're excited about.
Amy?
Jay, on the subject of your pathways, the Players Advisory Council had a meeting in Memphis to discuss eligibility in the future and potentially reducing the number of cards available to players. Do you expect to announce something formally by year's end so that guys know what they're playing for going into the 2025 season?
Listen, I think that the meeting in Memphis, Eamon, was a culmination of, a year's worth of work. And when you look at our Player Advisory Council, I look at Jason Gore, Phil Marburger, Tyler. Beginning of the year, we said, listen, what can we do to create more ownership and a higher level of engagement? We created committees where players actually have the ability to say and impact specific areas of the business. as it relates to strengthening the competitive model of the PGA Tour, you're right. That was the focus of those conversations in Memphis. What I can tell you is that those conversations are being player-led. There's strong alignment. The emotion has been taken out of the conversation, and a lot of the conversations are focused solely on looking at the data to create the most compelling and competitive platform for players to compete in, and at the same time be able to present a product that we know fans are going to respond very well to. So a long way of saying that any changes that we make ultimately are going to have to be approved by the PGA Tour Policy Board. I don't want to put a time frame on it, but I would say in terms of priorities as an organization and priorities within our governance, that work is one of our highest priorities.
And I'd just add to that you know, the 16 PAC members and the 6 player directors are leaning in more to the PGA Tour than they ever have, and really it's very, you know, aligned with the Fan Forward initiative. They're just asking, what is the best version of the PGA Tour? In this case, it's, you know, a little bit inside of our competitive system. What's the right number of players to put out on the course each week? What's the best version of our eligibility? So it's exciting, and, you know, there's no decisions that have been made. It has to be approved by the board, but we're seeing an incredible effort and thought process by our elected governance systems. It's exciting stuff.
I just add that for that meeting, you had all 6 player directors in attendance, and we had all 16 members of the Player Advisory Council. And the level of engagement, the level of discussion, the passion, it's just awesome to, you know, to witness. And again, I think it ultimately, the beneficiary of that will be this organization, a stronger, even more competitive PGA Tour, but also our fans.
Rex.
Jay, you've talked a lot about the expertise of SSG in sports and business. Can you give me an example of how you've been able to leverage that expertise?
Well, I would say one example I would point to, which I alluded to earlier, is for conversations about product and how we can continue to respond to a changing media marketplace, to changing interests from our fans. You know, being able to understand the processes that Major League Baseball and NFL have gone through and be able to apply it to the process that we're going through with our player directors has been very, very helpful. But I think in addition to that, when you've got the likes of John Henry and Sam Kennedy and Arthur Blank and Andy Cohen on our board, serving on committees, I'd say it's less about one thing. I think now that they're involved in the entirety of our business, we're seeing it across the board. And it comes in the form of the questions they ask, you know, the direction that they'll provide. And now that we have significant capital to invest, it's about creating the right structure to allow us to be able to identify the opportunities that are going to help strengthen the PGA Tour going forward. But they're not just investors. You know, they're in the meetings, they're at the table, they've gained a true understanding of this complex business, and now, you know, they're in a position to influence it in really positive ways.
Right behind you, Rex.
Hi, Jay. The PGA Tour secured a massive investment from SSG, and the players are going to have even more access to a lot of money through the equity program. So I suppose my question is, what's the point in still talking to the public investment funds in that sense?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that.
So the players, the tour has secured a massive investment from SSG.
Yes.
And the players are going to have massive potential to earn even more money with the equity program. So I suppose my question is, why still talk to public investment funds? Because obviously their biggest strength is the financial backing, isn't it? So what more is there to gain, I suppose?
You know, I think when you look at where we are today, and when you think about and what we hear from fans and what we're hearing from players, ultimately, we're both in a position, you know, to bring, you know, the best players in the world back together. And I think that's a good and aspirational goal. And as I said earlier, we're in those discussions, we're at the table, they're complex, and it's going to take time. But ultimately, PGA Tour is the greatest tour in the world. And we're going to continue to focus on the things that we control. And I think, as I've outlined, I'm really proud of the accomplishments our players and entire team have captured together. I think it's the right time to be having these conversations, and it's the right time not only for the PGA Tour but for the game, and that's why we've committed ourselves to those conversations.
Or Doug?
Two things, Jay. First, I wanted to go back to what Gabby was asking a minute ago. It's been either reported or understood that someone who has played in some capacity with Live is not eligible for a PGA Tour event for 1 year. Is that accurate? And if it's accurate, is it a written policy or guideline or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, so players that have never played on the tour and have no outstanding connection to previous membership, there is a 1 year waiting period between when you played an unauthorized event and being able to return to the PGA Tour.
What if they have?
Well, they're, players who are members or are members of the tour also, have all of our term and regulations and conduct policies applying to them. So I'm not going to get into details about that, but there's an additional set of guidelines there to consider.
And then, Jay, is there any possibility, and I mean, going into our third or fourth year here of this system with 2 playoff events in the South, can you see any possibility of a little more rotation? Mostly the first one.
Listen, I to your point, moving to the 3 FedEx Cup playoff events has worked very, very well, particularly now that we're in the 70-50-30 format that we're in. And if you look at the 3 playoff events, to be in Memphis at TPC Southwind, for us to have been in partnership with FedEx going back to 1986, our largest partner and the naming partner on our season-long championship, the FedEx Cup, and given the incredible connection we have to St. Jude. And when I say incredible connection, that connection is part of the ethos of the PGA Tour. Being able to tell the story and showcase the incredible work that St. Jude's is doing and the inspiring stories of these young kids is really important to FedEx. It's also really important to the PGA Tour. And, the event has produced some very dramatic finishes. And when you look at the strength of it, over the years that we've taken it over, and it's still relatively embryonic, the response in the community in terms of overall sales has nearly tripled. When you look at the BMW Championship, with the WGA, with John and Vince, and with BMW as partners, the fact that we together several years ago came together and said probably the greatest opportunity we have and the greatest thing that we can contribute would be take the Evans Scholars Foundation, which has 26 campus locations around the country, and start to move the BMW Championship to great venues. I think that has produced tremendous results, and all you had to do was look at those crowds last week and the great competitive drama there. And then here at East Lake, I mentioned earlier the East Lake Miracle. I mean, if you were sitting here in 1994 and you would have said that we would have had the culminating event of the PGA Tour competing for the FedEx Cup at East Lake, no one would have believed you. But when I look at the commitment that Tom Cousins and Tim Fincham made to each other and that we made to this community and the impact that we've had going back to our ethos, it's such a huge part of who we are. and to play at East Lake, a 1913 Donald Ross designed golf course. We've revitalized this community. We've renovated this golf course. We continue to push forward and trying to do everything we possibly can to grow and improve this championship. I think that portfolio of events has served the PGA Tour very, very well, particularly given the strong partnerships we have, including this week with Coca-Cola, Accenture, and Southern Company. But I think to your question, it's also part of what we do is at the end of each season, and this will certainly be helped by our Fan Forward initiative, we've got to continue to look at how we're performing and continue to look at ways to improve. I don't expect at this point any change to the model that we have, but I do expect us to continue to challenge our thinking as we go forward.
Got time for just a couple more on this side, Shed.
Yeah, Jay, I want to go back to fall TV and maybe just drill down a little bit and maybe just to share with our readers maybe an example or two of what might be different from the traditional Thursday to what you might, the viewer might see on a Friday, in these fall events.
I think what we've heard from fans and what we're working with our partners at Golf Channel to test, a couple of the themes that you may see us address. Number one, being able to see more shots and potentially fewer putts. I think the Friday is one of the most important days on the PGA Tour. It's what defines this organization. We get more than half the players that don't make it to the weekend. And being able to tell those stories, not just for that week, but in the context for what they're trying to achieve. And in the fall, obviously, they're competing for their cards, they're competing for their careers, and they're competing for consequence. So being able to pull those stories, forward is something that you can expect us to do, as well as you'll see a number of other broadcast innovations that we'll continue to test as we go forward. But I will say that this is based on feedback. It's also fan feedback. It's also based on feedback from Golf Channel, and we're doing this collectively and together with eyes wide open. And I think that shows you the strength of partnership we have there.
We'll do Todd and then Josh is our last.
Jay, when you and the governor of PIF jointly announced the framework agreement last summer, there seemed to be an intense priority to get this deal done. Now we're a little more than a year later. How would you compare the priority from both sides to last June?
Todd, I would say that the priority probably has been enhanced, is stronger. And that's a direct result of dialogue and conversation and really starting to talk about the future product vision and where we can take our sport. And I think when you get into productive conversations, that enhances the likelihood of positive outcomes, and that enhances the spirit of those very conversations. So I think that's where things stand.
Last question, Josh.
Yeah, Jay, I think a few minutes ago you mentioned that TV is still the primary way in which your fans watch your product. Last year your ratings were up about 1%, and this year, I know the season's still got one event left, but on one of your network partners was down between 15 and 17%. So my question is, how have you reassured those network partners that everything's going to be okay and this is just a blip on the radar?
We work with our network partners, our media partners, every single day. That's what partners do. And I think when you look at 2024, it's important to note, and I'm going to note it, that overall consumption across our platforms in aggregate is up. And that's a really good sign for the PGA Tour and the engagement that we have with our fans. As we do every single year, Josh, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at our entire season, we're going to look at what worked well, what didn't work as we had expected. Those are areas for improvement. and we're going to attack those areas of improvement. And when you couple that with the level of engagement we have with our players, when you couple that with the feedback that we're going to be gaining from our players, from our fans through Fan Forward, it puts us in a position to have really strong, actionable intelligence to be able to act upon. And I would also note that, you know, the media world is changing. And when you look at Nielsen, I mean, that's one of the inputs, but Nielsen itself is currently looking at its own system and will be announcing changes to its system. And when you look at reach of the PGA Tour, when that comes out, you're likely to see a double-digit increase in reach from the PGA Tour as they've been able to further dig into the intelligence that they are now capable of receiving through other partners. So there are a lot of elements and layers to the story, but I'm excited to spend the time with our partners and team and to lean into this and continue on the strong path that we're on.
Great. Jay, Tyler, thank you for your time. Media, thank you for your time. Have a great week here at the Tour Championship. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
The event was a great success, with PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan praising the overwhelming response from fans and creators. This Creator Classic marked a significant moment for YouTube golf, showcasing its growing influence on the sport. The Creator Classic has set a new standard for bringing YouTube and professional golf together, creating a unique and exciting experience for both fans and players. With such a positive response, we can only imagine what's next for YouTube golf. Thanks for listening. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the latest updates from the world of golf. See you next time.